Video and Film Review is made possible with public funds from the New York State Council on the Arts and by the members of 13.
Since the early days of the 20th century, America has been a nation of avid moviegoers, worshiping stars and consuming fantasies that were manufactured in Hollywood. In the boom years that followed World War II, movie consumption was given a new twist. The availability of inexpensive, easy-to-use 8mm cameras brought movie making into the home. Suddenly, the American middle class was in a position to create its own stars and fantasies, to document its children, vacations, and family rituals. A new form of folk art, the 8mm home movie, was born. It was inevitable that the 8mm format would be put to more ambitious ends. Among the first were the films of George and Mike Kuchar, teenage twins who lived in the Bronx and made exuberant parodies of Hollywood melodramas, starring their friends and neighbors. Originally screened for bemused amateur film societies, the Kuchar's films were discovered in 1962 and soon became a popular aspect of the burgeoning underground film scene. The Kuchars made soundtracks to accompany their films, but most serious 8mm movies were silent and non-narrative. In 1974, Kodak introduced the first sync-sound Super 8 cameras. The possibility of making low-budget talkies, together with the immediacy, portability, and relative automation that Super 8 offered, attracted a new wave of film artists, and narrative, admittedly experimental narrative, came back strong. One of the key members of this Super 8 underground is Eric Mitchell, who made his first Super 8 talkie, Kidnapped, in 1978.
No satisfaction. I can't get me no satisfaction. And I try, and I try, and I try.
It's a home movie, but it has, I don't know, people seem to be so frightened, especially younger people, to make a movie, and it seemed to me that you can almost not make a bad movie to try to figure out the limitation of what you know and what you can get on the film at the time when you're making movies. That's really what I was trying to do with this film, is like try not to fail, try to be true to the moment, or to be true to my limitations. The original story was going to be what happens when 6 or 7 terrorists are holed up in an apartment, and what do they talk about? Which was basically taken from the Battle Man of setup, where they eventually, I'm sure, had to stay in an apartment by themselves and talk about things. And there was a relationship between Ulrike Meinhof and Andreas Baader. Andreas Baader ultimately became to seem like he was a sort of a wimp, and she was a very strong character who sort of led that group. Out of those two characters were drawn characters in the film of a woman who is sort of, let's say, leading that group that's in that apartment. Eventually they discarded completely the idea of the terrorists and ended up making a movie about 6 people in East Village at the time and what they would be talking about if they were in an apartment. The movie was structured along the Super 8 cartridge, which lasts about 3 minutes. I decided to shoot a limited amount of cartridges, just enough to make an hour movie, and that would be the film. Stringing the rolls of Super 8 one after the other, pretty much in the way that the early Warhol films were made, which means that you show the leader and you show that you are not attempting to edit at all. Also in the films I made attempts to act in the film and direct the film together. We never tried to hide the fact that nobody knew their lines. We showed very clearly that the script was tacked on the wall, that they were reading it, that sometimes they would be diverging between the script and their own particular idiosyncrasies, let's say, at the time when the film was shot. And basically that was it. I mean.
I think you're really gorgeous. I think you're really beautiful. You're really beautiful. I think you're really magnificent. I think you're magnificent. Like just the way you are, you're just beautiful. You're beautiful. You're very beautiful. You're just fabulous. You're really fabulous. You're really fabulous. I mean, you're so fabulous that you're very, very, very beautiful. I mean, every inch of your body just stinks of celluloid. It really reeks of celluloid. You're like a cross between Rita Hayworth and James Mansfield. Or is it Darcy Long?
So again, I bought film and a camera, but this time I wanted to change subject matter, and I wanted to change style, I wanted to change the whole thing. So I decided to use New York, first of all, and I decided to devise a story around New York, which would make a parallel between New York of the time when we made the movie and Rome, let's say, post-war Rome, let's say, of 1950 to 1960, sort of post-war Italian movie. The title was Red Italy. Red Italy was trying to ape, I guess I'll have to use that word, bigger productions such as La Dolce Vita, and we tried to, even though it was a Super 8 film, to make it look as lush and sophisticated as those films. Of course, sometimes it came out a lot cheaper, which was part of the humor and part of the fun of it, which goes back to the idea of making a Super 8 without having other people telling you what to do, because that comes into the films, which is actually very funny, because it doesn't have that totally sterile background and preconceived ideas and big production. So you end up finding that by trying to make these big movies with this little cameras and stuff, a lot of things enter the frame which you never expected to be there, which end up being very fresh and being very amusing and honest.
First, there was Monica. She was a rich Italian blonde, too bored to stay home. She had to go out every night looking for fun, but never having any. We had never actually met, but I can imagine there she was, roaming the streets of Rome, looking for kicks. She never had enough. He was an American GI stationed in Italy. trying to pass the time the best he could. Oh, I guess he had better luck than me. Not that I envied him, but still, he had his chance. Maybe because he was better looking than me. Maybe because he wore a uniform.
The whole sensibility was sort of to make a sort of hammed up movie with overtly political tones, but it was not really meant to be a political movie. It was more meant to be a parody of a political movie. But I realized that the advantage of the system was basically that you could very quickly come up with an idea, very quickly write a script without having to try to talk to other people, finding out whether they like the script, whether they want to give you money. Get your own money, make your own movie, and don't worry about what the other people are going to say, which gave it a genuine strength, and which was, I mean, very valid, you know. We decided to find a place which we could call our own, and where we could show our movies and movies of others who had been making movies at the time, which was going to be called the New Cinema. We found a storefront on St. Mark's Place, which was really the perfect location since that particular area of town was really booming with young people coming there. There was a definite attraction being able to own your own cinema and make your own movies and have basically your own setup for distribution and production. But the setup ended up falling apart because there was a sort of well, it was very difficult to make money, basically. The movies made money back, but you couldn't really live on making those movies at the time. So the thing collapsed.
Many of the filmmakers who got their start at the New Cinema were associated with New York's avant-garde rock scene. Using members of local punk bands as a ready-made pool of dramatic talent, these filmmakers produced movies that paralleled the music's energy, iconography, and pragmatic anyone-can-do-it aesthetic. Vivian Dick's She Had Her Gun Already, which premiered at the New Cinema in 1979, stars two musicians, Pat Place and Lydia Lunch, as women who are locked in a mysterious psychic struggle. Their battle begins on the Lower East Side, continues on the IND, and ends up in Coney Island. Many filmmakers discovered Super 8 lends itself readily to spontaneous, on-the-street filming. Manuel de Landa, an artist who has worked in 16mm and video, uses Super 8, as a tourist might, to document the city and incidentally make a record of his own graffiti within the urban landscape.
Okay, the first time I came to New York, and I saw graffiti in trains, I was impressed, right? First of all, when I found out it was Puerto Rican and blacks men, I mean, they would be whites doing that, but the fact that it was like a third world reaction against not having surfaces to speak. I mean, that most media surfaces are dominated by whites, and they would just take over, you know, the walls of the subways to kind of make a statement, even though it was a real silly adolescent statement in which you just sign your name and the name of your gang or whatever. So I decided that I really wanted to start doing forms of graffiti that they hadn't been doing, just to inspire them and see if they would find new ways of vandalizing buildings and things. The way I got the idea to do to attack posters as opposed to, say, attack subway walls or whatever, is I started seeing all these, people who would just walk around and tear part of posters and produce real incredible pictorial effects on the subway by just kind of tearing part of a poster, and then you would see two posters, but you would also see kind of the white paper kind of creating real nice kind of Jackson Pollock effects with a lot of force. So I started, carrying around a knife so that I could just kind of cut slit, and then I could grab onto, so I could start tearing them apart. Then one day I started just cutting out eyes and cutting out mouths, and they would look real nice. But then I realized that I could keep all those eyes and mouths, so I started making this collection of eyes, mouths, like this. Every time I would see like a horse head or a pig's head or whatever, I would just like cut out all these eyes and mouths, collect them, and then kind of launch an attack in one particular area. I would just carry my Elmer's glue, your regular tools, and just transform the faces of Winston posters, with the eyes and mouths and all the other organs I had collected in previous things. And then it started working out real nice. So I started. First, I didn't even shoot them. I would just like go out in the streets and start doing them and sign them like islamism or schizopolitics or something. I kind of disguised myself as a tourist with a Super 8 camera, trying to make it almost like invisible or something, and it really works. I mean, I was shooting people 2 inches away from their heads, and or walking towards people and stopping 2 inches away from their face, and then start moving the camera around or zooming in and out and stuff, and people just wouldn't react as if I had a bigger piece of equipment, or if I had looked like if I was from a TV station or something. I mean, it was just like this crazy tourist was trying to get, crazy shots of Wall Street. So they would just, take it as home movies, with the innocence of home movies. I mean, their image wasn't in danger.
Just a minute, Tracy. This one is on me. All right, I'm thinking.
Does it hang from the
What hangs from the ceiling and whistle?
does it run along the floor and sing?
Listen,
Does it climb up buildings?
just a minute. What the fuck was that?
Harmful is a documentary. Now, I wanted to do, and in a documentary, you normally try to render the camera as neutral as possible. The camera is not supposed to interfere with the events that it's recording. Otherwise, you're not having like an objective point of view of what's going on. Now, I wanted to push that to its limits and use the camera for almost every other purpose, except recording, neutral or objective facts. So I was, like the first thing that came to my mind was like I would start harassing people with a camera, right? So, you start walking towards somebody who's like standing there. I mean, this area at lunchtime is almost like a Magritte painting, right? You have like tons of people, all of them dressed exactly the same with their hats and looking just like the typical New York bureaucrat, right? And they are very kind of decent, and they don't like to kind of have much interaction with each other or anything. So that kind of, I got away with enormous amount of crap. I mean, like I would just like, start walking, towards like a group of people, and I wouldn't stop, and if they wouldn't like, open up, I would just kind of start kind of like, trip over them, and like I would fall down, or I would like, push them away. Most of the time they would just like, open up and kind of let me pass. But on doing that, they would be revealing the presence of the camera. I mean, they would be moving this way because the camera was attacking them, right? So even though you couldn't see the camera in the shot. You could see it in the reactions of people. In Harmful or Fatal, if Swallowed, I did a couple of things with bumps which were really good. Like I would spot one of these guys, right? And I would see that he was like looking for stuff in a garbage can. So I would just like buy a slice of hot pizza, right? And I would like plant all these pieces of pizza in different garbage cans and just wait hidden with my Super 8 camera, you know, for the guy to come and find, you know, the pizza. And so, you know, it was like real nice because they were like real, it was like real spontaneous. The guy would find the hot pizza and, you know, it was like a feast for him. So he would like start, you know, eating it like truly, you know, delighted of what he had found, like a piece of hot food. Particularly in the Grand Central area, there's all these people who, I don't know if it's like they're being just released from mental institutions or something, but that they really hallucinate the city in political terms. I mean, they start talking and at first it would just sound like it's just, you know, this crazy stuff, but if you really listen to it, they're actually putting together all these, you know, conspiracy theories and all these things about, you know, things that just happen at the UN and this or that meeting, and it would like really hallucinate things in political terms.
Chest in the world. I used to have one of the toughest chests in the world. I got burned. I got badly burnt, sir. Very badly burnt. I used to be a full-fledged gorilla, sir. You can see by my fingers, baby. They doctored me up, baby. I had the teeth of a gorilla, baby.
A former painter, Erica Beckman has been filming exclusively in Super 8 since 1977. She works against the limitations of the format to create movies with elaborate props, complicated special effects, and dense soundtracks. Her films defy easy categorization. They have more in common with performance art and psychological tests than they do with home movies.
I stopped painting in 1974. I wanted to use film as an art form, and I didn't want to be intimidated by the cost, so I chose to work in Super 8. The camera that I started to use allowed me to do rewinds, which was very close to painting at the time, transparent images, except that they extended in action rather than being just colors and overlays of material, which is what I was using. I developed a style using action and gesture and props and music that dealt with narrative and actors, but didn't use them. So I developed a method of making films out of constructions, you see, and these constructions were a replacement for narratives and dialogue. In making a film, before I can actually shoot, I have to go through a whole process of organizing. So I make these storyboards. These are all extremely rough sketches of the whole film from beginning to end. And I throw away a whole lot of ideas that don't seem to work for the whole film. So they start off in this general way, and then I get more specific. In the film Out of Hand, it was very, very important for me to do very clear storyboards, because it was a film that just specifically dealt with objects. It was a construction of objects in one's memory. Okay, what we have here is the very beginning of the film, where the boy is actually, in the narrative of the film, the boy is hiding from people that are coming to take him out of the house that he's lived in all his life. And the people are represented by one figure, a military type person, who finds him with the aid of a flashlight. And we see the boy getting closer and closer, zooming in on his hand with the flashlight directing us closer and closer to the beckoning of this person. And the person is beckoning him into the search for, in his mind, the officer is telling him to look for something before he leaves. Okay, come closer to it. And then he turns around and runs. And he runs from this figure who has a kind of threat to him and runs back to his house to find what he's looking for. Misguided as he is in his search, he goes for the most common element, which is his toy, his favorite toy. He pulls up a rocking horse, and all the time he's sort of fixated by this object. He thinks that this is what he's looking for, and he dwells on it in the film for a long time, and finally discards it because it's not what he wants. And the way he discards it is by envisioning a kind of negative image with that horse. In Out of Hand, it was very interesting because what I did was I shot my main character searching, putting his hands into a box, and then coming out with and putting a shield up. And each time that he put the shield up, I stopped the camera, I marked on a sheet of paper what frame I was on, and then I had him freeze, and then resume action and go back down into the box and come up again with the shield and freeze, and I kept note of that. Then I rewound the film and set up against a black background, very similar to this one, a pulley device overhead. So the objects were then pushed in the same space as he was located in. I mean, I wasn't working with miniature objects. I was working with full-scale boxes that went from, say, 2 feet in front of the camera back to where I approximated his shield was, about 6 or 7 feet from the camera. And then I cut the string and they dropped on the floor. And I pushed them back, and when I got to the point on the frame where his shield went up, I then dropped the box. And I was able to get something that looked as if it was really well planned, you know, in terms of a lab doing the work, you know, or me sitting in front of an optical machine. But I did it in the space of about 5 hours. See, it's just really hard for me to talk about limitations because I really am so immersed in Super 8 that I don't even really recognize them.
When you start shooting, you don't feel like in 16mm that there's like hundreds of dollars going through the shutter.
If ultimately you want to make a movie, you can always make a movie. That's what the thing that Super 8 is about, I think. It's not, you can't lie to yourself, you know, with it, you know.
The most interesting avant-garde filmmakers to emerge during the late 1970s have worked either partially or entirely with Super 8. Some have gone on to 16mm, but for reasons of cost, flexibility, and availability, Super 8 is likely to remain the starting point and cutting edge of avant-garde filmmaking for many years to come.